A Hollywood career rarely collapses because of one scandal. It's usually a string of red flags nobody wanted to acknowledge, and that's basically the story sitting underneath everything that's happened to Blake Lively over the last couple of years. For more than 10 years, Blake's biggest asset wasn't really her filmography, it was the version of herself she let the world see. Fans watched her bake alongside Martha Stewart, trade playful jabs with Ryan Reynolds online, post glimpses of her kids and home life, and answer interview questions with the kind of casual, girl-next-door energy that made millions of people feel like they actually knew her. That carefully built persona is what made her so valuable, because it turned an extraordinary, wildly wealthy life into something that felt reachable. For years, that formula just worked. The magazine covers, the Instagram captions, the red carpet interviews, all of it reinforced the same message over and over again. She was gorgeous, successful, married to one of the most beloved men in Hollywood, and somehow still relatable. That combination is what let her sell everything from blockbuster movies to hair care, from cocktail mixers to high fashion. Then, the summer of 2024 rolled around, bringing the It Ends With Us media rounds with it, and the exact personality that had carried her career for a decade suddenly became a liability. She walked into most of those promotional stops leaning on the same fashion-forward, breezy tone that had always worked for her. Except this time, she wasn't selling a lifestyle brand. She was fronting a film about a woman clawing her way out of an abusive relationship, and audiences were bracing for something far more serious than red carpet small talk. So, when Blake kept leaning on the same playbook that had served her in lighter moments, a lot of people read it as tone-deaf. The same charm that once made her likable now made her look disconnected from the weight of the story she was representing. And reportedly, that's exactly what critics online zeroed in on almost immediately. Her team, from what's been reported, appeared to lean on the same multi-purpose promotional strategy that had worked for years, where a single red carpet stop could plug a movie, a hair care line, and a drink brand all at once. Throughout the It Ends With Us rollout, Blake was reportedly juggling promotion for her Blake Brown hair company and her beverage ventures right alongside a film wrestling with the realities of DV. For a lot of viewers, that overlap felt jarring because the emotional weight of the movie was now sharing airtime with product placement, fashion moments, and party appearances, all pointing back to Blake's personal empire. Instead of the press cycle staying focused on the survivors who might see themselves in Lily's story,
which was posted to the official movie social media, where Blake says, grab your friends, wear your florals to go see a domestic violence movie.
Hello, Blake Lively here.
Colleen Hoover.
And It Ends With Us is in theaters now, so grab your friends, wear your florals, and head out to see it.
The conversation kept drifting back toward Blake herself and the business empire surrounding her name. Ryan Reynolds became part of that same promotional universe when a lighthearted crossover video tied It Ends With Us to Deadpool and Wolverine, pairing a heavy domestic drama with his own superhero comedy in the same press window. The apparent goal may have been to borrow Ryan's massive built-in audience to boost visibility for Blake's movie, but the pairing left people asking whether a story centered on abuse was being handled like another cross-promotional stunt. Blake pulled in even more attention when she mentioned that Ryan had reportedly contributed to the film's now famous rooftop scene. Because Ryan wasn't credited as director or listed among the film's writers, that offhand remark set off questions about how much creative pull he actually held and why her husband seemed to be shaping choices on a project that was supposed to belong to the person directing it. The sit-down with reporter Jake Hamilton became one of the most talked about moments of the entire press tour, after Jake asked Blake how she'd respond if women who related to the film wanted to reach out to her personally.
So if someone understands the themes of this movie, comes across you in public, and they want to really talk to you, what's the best way for them to be able to talk to you about this? How would you recommend they go about it?
Like asking for like my address or my phone number or like my location share. Or I could just location share you and then we could, I'm just curious
Just
about,
social
like,
security number.
I'm a Virgo, so I'm
Yeah.
like, are we talking logistics? Are we talking emotionally?
It was a meaningful, fair question, one that handed her a real opening to acknowledge those women and speak to how the story might resonate with them. Instead, Blake reportedly cracked a joke asking whether that meant fans would be showing up at her doorstep with her home address in hand, then pivoted into a semantic back and forth over what the interviewer even meant by someone approaching her. To a lot of viewers, that answer landed badly. The question wasn't really about logistics, it was about survivors looking for a moment of connection with someone tied to a film about their exact experience. Blake was reclining casually on the couch, laughing her way through the response while Brandon Sklenar sat right next to her. And that lightness is what turned the clip into a lightning rod. Rather than talking about empathy or responsibility, the exchange became a joke about the literal meaning of someone walking up to her in public. That clip reportedly did more damage to her image than almost anything else from the entire press tour because nobody needed an entertainment reporter to explain what had happened. People could just watch the video themselves and form their own take. Some viewers saw an actress fumbling her way through an awkward beat with a nervous joke. Others saw a wealthy celebrity visibly annoyed that an ordinary woman, someone genuinely touched by what her own film was actually about, might want a moment of her time. Blake and Ryan have long been sold as one of Tinseltown's most glamorous power couples, but a single choice from their wedding day has followed them around for years. The two exchanged vows at Boone Hall Plantation and Gardens in South Carolina. What was pitched at the time as a fairy tale celebrity wedding has instead become a repeat flashpoint for criticism, since plenty of people feel a location tied to that kind of painful history has no business doubling as a party backdrop. That criticism has only grown louder over time as public awareness around plantation weddings has expanded, and more people started questioning why celebrities kept treating these properties like romantic scenery. Ryan has since apologized publicly, reportedly calling it something he and Blake deeply regret, but the backlash never fully faded, especially since people kept revisiting the couple's link to that property and the decision-making that led them there in the first place. Things got even more complicated once fans circled back to Blake's now defunct lifestyle site, Preserve, and dug up a separate controversy also tied to the legacy of the pre-Civil War South. Back in 2014, Blake launched Preserve, an e-commerce and lifestyle brand built around her personal taste in clothing, food, home decor, and artisan-made goods. One of the site's most heavily criticized pieces was a blog post titled "The Allure of Antebellum," which romanticized the visual style of the pre-Civil War era while glossing over the human suffering that defined that same period. That piece leaned heavily on nostalgic language about Southern charm, and a lot of readers felt it repackaged one of the most painful stretches of American history into a pretty aesthetic mood board. A separate controversy surfaced in 2016 when Blake was promoting Cafe Society, directed by Woody Allen. At a moment when serious allegations against Allen were getting renewed media coverage, Blake discussed her own time on set and characterized him as someone who made the women around him feel empowered. She also said she didn't feel it was her place to weigh in on situations she hadn't personally lived through. That drew criticism, with people feeling she was highlighting her own pleasant experience while sidestepping the much bigger allegations everyone else was discussing. Whether that was her intention or not, the moment fed into a growing narrative that Blake found it easier to sing the praises of powerful people she'd worked with than to sit with genuinely uncomfortable questions about them. At a different 2016 press stop, a reporter reportedly wished Blake well on her pregnancy, and Blake, in turn, congratulated the journalist on her own supposed bump, even though the reporter wasn't pregnant at all.
First of all, congrats on your little bump.
Congrats on your little bump.
What about my bump?
Did you guys love wearing those kind of clothes that you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you know, working in
Everyone
digital.
wants to talk about the clothes, but I wonder if they would ask the men about the clothes.
I would.
I love Jesse's
He has some
suits and
beautiful.
how
That's what I'm saying.
he
His wardrobe was beautiful.
I know.
Corey's
Everybody.
wardrobe
I
was
know.
gorgeous.
He's
Those
so great.
high-waisted pants.
That whole exchange reportedly carried the same tense energy, with Blake and her co-star seemingly more locked into ribbing each other than actually addressing whoever was asking the questions. When these older clips got dug back up, people stopped brushing them off as one-off mistakes and started framing them as a recurring pattern. The plantation wedding, the antebellum blog post, the Woody Allen remarks, and that awkward old sit-down happened years apart with nothing connecting them on the surface, yet together they became the go-to receipts whenever someone argues that Blake's polished image cracks the moment things get uncomfortable. Blake's business resume has hit its own turbulence too, starting with Preserve. The site debuted in 2014 behind a wave of press coverage and sold high-priced handmade apparel, accessories, and home goods. Blake reportedly hoped it would grow into a full-scale lifestyle empire, but the concept never found buyers to match its price tag. A lot of the merchandise carried a steep cost, and the site got flagged for feeling out of touch with everyday shoppers. By October 2015, barely a year after launch, Preserve shut down entirely, and Blake publicly acknowledged the venture hadn't lived up to what she'd hoped, partly blaming the timing of its early rollout. Reports about what was reportedly happening behind the scenes at Preserve piled on another layer of difficulty. Ex-staffers described a stressful workplace and voiced concerns over how the company was actually being managed internally. Those claims clashed hard with Preserve's public branding, which had been marketed entirely around creativity and authenticity. Even setting aside whether every claim from former staff holds up entirely, the allegations raised legitimate questions about the gap between the brand image Blake was marketing and what was reportedly going on inside her own company. Preserve was meant to prove her personal aesthetic could carry a real business. Instead, it collapsed quickly, becoming one of the earliest cases of a Blake Lively project pulling in massive attention without ever converting it into staying power. Years later, Blake circled back to consumer goods with Betty Buzz, a non-alcoholic cocktail mixer brand, followed by its boozier sibling, Betty Booze. Both labels leaned almost entirely on her celebrity and personal image, dropping into a beverage industry that was already saturated with well-established competitors. That kind of setup can work brilliantly when audiences genuinely connect with the famous face attached to a product, but it also builds in a weak point. The instant that person's reputation takes a hit, the business riding on it takes a hit too. The "it ends with us fallout" put that risk on full display. Since Blake wasn't merely an actress fronting a mixer line anymore, she'd become the epicenter of a much thornier public conversation. Her business ventures, her acting career, her marriage, her past interviews, and her overall public reputation had all fused together in the audience's mind. That's the risk of stacking multiple companies on top of a single, curated personal brand. When fans love the person behind the label, nearly anything carrying that name can catch fire commercially, but the second that relationship sours, every product has to prove it can stand on its own. Preserve, Betty Buzz, Betty Booze, and Blake Brown each launched with a huge press push, largely because Blake herself was the draw. She was reportedly aiming for something along the lines of a full lifestyle conglomerate, but unlike a figure like Martha Stewart, whose credibility was earned over decades of cookbooks, television, and hands-on know-how, Blake's ventures leaned almost entirely on her celebrity and personal style rather than any deep track record. Once that public image started to wobble, the fragility baked into that business model became easier to spot. Blake could no longer count on consumers buying in simply because a product carried her name. The same audience that once found her products aspirational is now approaching everything she puts out with a lot more skepticism. None of that guarantees every venture is destined to flop, but it means those products now have to win people over on their own terms in a way they rarely had to before. For a long stretch, Blake's public narrative leaned on style, motherhood, real estate, and friendships, with her partnership with Ryan running through most of it. She turned up in polished magazine spreads and glowing red carpet coverage, and most outlets covered her as an easy, likable celebrity. That shifted noticeably during the promotional run for It Ends With Us. Once observers noticed Justin Baldoni kept showing up apart from Blake and the rest of the cast at official events. Fans went as far as tracking who arrived together, whose accounts followed whose, and who seemed to be dodging whom. And those tiny details snowballed fast into a much bigger storyline. For a long stretch of her career, the branding around Blake leaned on the witty spouse, the doting mom, the effortless tastemaker, and the glamorous friend fans felt like they already knew from scrolling her feed. That image is what sold magazines, skincare, cocktails, and movie tickets. The notion that she had money and fame, yet still felt within reach. But once the cracks started showing, fans didn't simply drift away quietly. Instead, they went back through everything she'd ever posted, questioning how much of that had been carefully staged since day one. That shift turned a lot more concrete once the It Ends With Us dispute escalated, because the audience suddenly had far more than interviews and Instagram captions to sift through. People started combing through lawsuits, leaked texts, court filings, and other paperwork stemming from the fallout between Blake and Justin. Per Justin's legal filings, Blake and Ryan allegedly pushed to take over creative decisions on the project, with reported clashes over competing edits of the film and last-minute changes to pivotal scenes. Blake had already publicly claimed that Ryan contributed to the rooftop scene, framing it at the time as a fun behind-the-scenes anecdote. But once the legal fight became public, that same comment took on a completely different meaning. Instead of sounding like a supportive husband lending a hand, it started to look like more evidence that Ryan had inserted himself into a project where Justin was supposed to be the creative lead. Blake wasn't shouldering all of this pressure solo because Ryan had always been deeply woven into her public image and her professional network. Their marriage was never purely personal. It had effectively become a shared brand asset for both of them. Ryan showed up in promotional material tied to Blake's projects, backed her business ventures, helped craft the playful public persona around their relationship, and reportedly got pulled into creative conversations tied to the film. For years, that partnership made Blake even more powerful, since Ryan came with his own enormous following, a booming business portfolio, and a track record as one of the most well-liked stars working today. But once Ryan got pulled into the legal dispute himself, the same bond that once shielded them both began cutting the other way. Criticism landing on one of them could now spill straight over onto the other. The Taylor Swift thread added yet another wrinkle to this whole saga, given that Taylor has been counted among Blake's tightest and most high-profile friendships for years. As the legal fight expanded, Taylor's name reportedly got dragged into disputes over what allegedly went on behind the scenes, including efforts from Justin's legal team to obtain records connected to her. Later court filings and private communications drew intense scrutiny, since the public was now watching whether famous friends had been dragged into a fight that originally only involved Blake, Justin, and one film. What once looked like an unbreakable friend group suddenly seemed messier once private conversations started showing up in legal documents. That development stung, because Blake's celebrity circle has been baked into her appeal from the start. She was never famous purely on her own merits. She moved inside an exclusive world of Ryan, Taylor, A-list peers, publicists, attorneys, and business contacts. For a long time, that circle made her look practically bulletproof. But once lawsuits and filings started exposing how many people were quietly involved behind the curtain, that same network started looking less like famous friends supporting each other and more like a coordinated effort to control the narrative. That's probably the main reason it's proven so hard for Blake to rebuild her public image. The damage goes deeper than one bad press tour. Her audience now understands how much machinery goes into shielding somebody in her position. It's not that she's short on money or connections, it's that she's lost her grip on what those things actually mean to fans now. It ends with us still open strong at the box office on the strength of Colleen Hoover's readership, but the media rounds, the Wear Your Florals video, the Jake Hamilton sit-down, and the mounting backlash from survivors ended up dominating the conversation almost as much as the film itself. That kind of noise can genuinely hurt a movie's momentum, and it also raised bigger questions about future franchise potential tied to the same book series. Meanwhile, Blake was juggling a legal battle involving Justin Baldoni, Ryan, and a wider circle of publicists and attorneys, the kind of litigation that reportedly racks up steep monthly costs fast. That financial pressure matters, because so much of Blake's business model has always leaned on the public liking her. Once that goodwill weakens, every venture tied to her name has to work harder to stay afloat, and brand partners get more cautious about the risk of attaching themselves to her. Blake built a career where acting, business, marriage, and online presence all fed into one another, which meant that once her public image took damage, that damage rippled across everything at once. That's why the backlash mattered so much. It wasn't one bad interview, it became the moment people started picking apart her whole pattern of behavior, revisiting old controversies, and asking how much of what she'd shown them had been carefully managed. Her career was never really built on acting alone. It came down to audiences genuinely warming to Blake Lively herself, or at least to the version of her they thought they'd gotten to know. Once that bond cracked, every piece of the brand got shakier. So, can she claw that trust back, or has that ship sailed? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Thank you so much for watching. If this one kept you hooked, make sure to like the video and subscribe to Clout Fallout so you don't miss the next update on this story.